Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. We've got a wonderful panel for you today to talk about why BSB is such a wonderful option for publishing. So I just want to give you a quick rundown of what we're going to do. I will start by introducing each of our wonderful panelists in turn, and I'm going to ask them to talk a little bit about their publishing journey after I introduce each of them. Then, if there are any questions that you all have, audience, we would love to hear from you. So please feel free to put any questions at any point in the Q&A section, and I'll be taking a peek at that. And I also have some questions in my back pocket if we need them. So we're going to get started with Anne Shade. Anne is an incurable romantic who believes there is no limit to love. She's dedicated to writing romances that show BIPOC women who love women in a beautiful and positive light. She lives in West Orange, New Jersey, and when she's not writing about love, she reads fantasy novels and helps make couples' wedding dreams a reality. Love that. Romance all throughout your life, Anne. So can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to publish with BSB?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I decided to publish with BSB because there was something about their the authors they had on deck that attracted me, as well as I guess that's the main thing. The authors they had on deck is what attracted me. It was diverse, and there were some authors that I've read before, so there was some familiarity there. And I looked up quite a few after that, just to see what their stories were like, and I liked what I was seeing, so I ran with it.
Excellent. We are so glad you're here, Anne. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to move on to Nance Sparks. So a vivid imagination spurred Nance Sparks' desire to write lesbian romance. I think we can all agree that vivid imagination is something we all share. Nance lives in South Central Wisconsin with her spouse. Her passion for photography, homesteading, hiking, gardening, and most anything outdoors comes through in her stories. So Nance, what made you decide to publish with BSB?
Honestly, it was the only one for me. I like Anne mentioned, all of my favorite authors, or many of them, were with BSB. And when I looked at, when I looked to publish the works I had created, I looked at the submission criteria and went, I've got to try. And I only submitted with BSB. So it was that simple.
Excellent. It was just the right fit and it all worked out.
It really was. It worked out perfectly.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. So next I'm going to move to Erin Dutton. Erin resides near Nashville, Tennessee with the best dog in the whole world and her wife. Not sure how that's going to go over later, Erin, but I'm just saying.
Probably not very well.
When she's not working or writing, Erin can be found on the golf course, traveling, or playing in the backyard with, yes, the best dog ever. Erin, why did you decide to publish with BSB?
So I started publishing with BSB in 2007, and I had, I guess, what I was calling a finished first draft in my hand at that time, and kind of dared myself to see what would happen if I put it out there. Looked at my bookshelf and looked at who was publishing the kind of stories that I wanted to write. And, most of the ones up there were bold strokes. So, and I was a fan, of course, of Radcliffe's writing. And so I decided, again, like Nance said, that was going to be the first place I was going to submit. And luckily, I didn't have to submit anywhere else.
Excellent. Excellent. So I'm seeing some themes already, right? One big theme that's coming up is, you want to publish with BSB because there are people who you respect and whose work you admire already doing that. And that's what drove you to that. So we'll see how that theme plays out. So after Erin, we are going to move to Morgan. So Morgan Lee Miller lives in Washington, D.C. with her 2 feline children, Milo and Elsa. During the day, she works for an international animal welfare nonprofit. And at night, she's catching up on her to-be-read list, spamming her social media with cat pictures no one asked for, or working on her next novel. I think you should follow Morgan clearly to get the cat pictures. I'm pretty sure we do want those. But Morgan, why
people
BSB?
do? Some people don't, but if you follow me, you don't get a choice.
So what do you think? Why BSB?
So it's along the lines of everyone else. My first sapphic romance I ever read was Strawberry Summer by someone named Melissa Braden. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of her. but I loved it so much. And this is when I took a
good.
break from writing, and I read Strawberry Summer. And this was when I was starting to realize you don't have to go through literary agents. You can self-publish, you can go through small publishers. And after Strawberry Summer, I read a couple more BSB books, and I just really liked what they were publishing. So I went for it.
That is such a great story. I appreciate that. I love this connection because we're gonna move right to Melissa. And
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So Melissa Brayden is the multi-award-winning author of 19 contemporary romance novels, all published with BSB. She enjoys crafting what she hopes are fun, flirty stories with lots and lots of kissing. So Melissa, why BSB?
Well, first of all, I just want to say how cool that is to hear that from Morgan, and I'm happy for that connection. I think that my journey was a little more gradual, and if you are somebody who reads intrigue, you know about like first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and kind of what the intent is. I think mine would be a second-degree publishing because there wasn't a lot of intention behind it. I started off as an avid reader of romance since I was a kiddo, probably too young to have been reading romance, quite honestly. But that kind of just morphed into me having a summer off. I was a high school theater teacher, and so I was a storyteller by nature. I was an actor, director type. I'd done TV news before. Everything I look at in my past has an element of storytelling to it. So I know that that's a component of who I am. But writing was never something that I had done before. So I had a summer off from my teaching job, and I was just really enjoying the books that I was reading, and I thought, well, maybe this is something that I could try out. And I don't think I started the book with the intent of, I'm going to submit this to a publisher. I think it was more of an exercise in creativity and wanting to see if I could do it, and maybe romanticizing, not to borrow the word from the genre, but really romanticizing the concept of maybe sending it off to a publisher one day. And so it took me about a year, and I wrote Waiting in the Wings that way. It started over as a summer project that bled into the school year, and then decided, I think maybe I'll just submit this. I mean, maybe I'll never hear from them again, but who knows? And these guys were talking about, well, I knew who published where, and I know where I wanted. I had to research that. I didn't know, but I was such an avid reader. I could say, okay, I like these authors, and Google says that when I'm looking for a publisher, I should maybe see who publishes kind of what I write. And there were some voices at Bold Strokes already that kind of people I looked up to, and they sounded a little bit like me. So I thought, well, that seems like the company I should start with. And I had read, not knowing anything, I read that most publishing houses want you to submit and wait before submitting elsewhere. And that seemed to be pretty standard. So I did, and I didn't know if I would hear back, but they said I would, and I did. I heard back. They, and in the window that they said I would hear back, which was fabulous. And with some tweaking, because I was green and didn't know a whole lot, so they asked for some tweaking on my part, which I did to the novel. It was accepted, and I never had to then go on and shop it anywhere else. But when I look back at the story, I do kind of feel it was meant to be this partnership because of the way it all happened. And so that was a really long-winded way to tell you my story, but that's how it played out.
We love knowing the details. That is fantastic. Excellent. Well, so let me just do a quick show of hands based on some other themes that have come up. How many of us in this panel maybe read romances before we probably should have? Anybody else want to own that? Okay, everybody. Great. All right. So given that, I've got a great question from the audience, and chat, you're welcome to also chime in on this if you would like to share those stories too, that's fine. But I've got a great question from Anne, and Anne's question is, what was your process to take the plunge and submit your writing for potential publication? And really, Melissa's talked a little bit about this, right? That process of, can I do this? Who should I submit to? Am I really going to put my work out there and possibly get a no? What was your process for that? Let's start with you, Nance.
It was scary. My process, honestly, I had knee replacement surgery and found myself with 12 weeks of time. And I looked at all of these novels that I'd written over the years and said it was, it's time to do something with these. So I submitted one and then read another one that I'd done and made some tweaks and changes and submitted that one to Bold Strokes, and was thrilled when I got a phone call or an email that Radcliffe wanted to talk to me about one of my submissions. So, I just was over the moon excited about that. But it was just a leap of faith, honestly. I was at a point of kind of looking at pre-retirement and what do I do with my life from this point on. And I'm very happy that I have found this path. So
I love that. Great. Well, thank you. I'm so glad you did too. Anne, how about you? What was your process for submitting writing for publication?
I previously self-published, and prior to that, I did look for literary agents and went through the whole big house publishing and I got 72 letters, and I counted them, 72 letters. Great story, not what we're looking for right now. So I had pretty much, given up on submitting to anyone and started self-publishing, but then that costs a whole lot of money and takes a whole lot of time. So I given up, and it was about 3-4 years since I had self-published, and I decided, maybe I'll look, something up. I was a reader of Missouri Vaughn, read her stuff, saw that she published through Bold Stroke Books, and started looking them up, and that's when I researched them. And then I actually did, I slid into her DM on Facebook and messaged her and said, I'm a big fan, I'm thinking of publishing, just wanted to know your thoughts on Bold Stroke Books. Didn't expect to hear from her. And she answered me, I guess about a day later, and told me she loved them and they're great. And I was like, okay, well, there's a vote of confidence, and then did more research on their authors. And I said, okay, so I can either man up or woman up and submit, or I can sit here and just wonder what if. So I submitted, and like Melissa, I was like, I'm probably not going to hear from them, and didn't think anything of it. And 3 weeks later, I got a nice little letter from Sandy letting me know they were interested, and I did a jig, happy dance, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. Oh, I love that. That's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Let's see, Morgan, how about you?
Mine was similar to Anne's. I spent every summer during college just obsessing over the query letter. Created an Excel spreadsheet of all these literary agents. I submitted to all of them. The first rejection was exciting. And then after like 4 years of getting rejections and like one partial manuscript asks, I'm like, I'm going to take a break. This is a lot. And so I switched over. I was writing straight romances. And once I came to terms with my sexuality, it inspired me to scrap everything and start from scratch. And so that's when I started writing a young adult romance. And the things that were drilled into my head during college, you need to read what you write. I'm like, yeah, I do. So I went on Amazon, and tying back into the story I briefly said, I bought 2 books, Annie on My Mind, Strawberry Summer, read Strawberry Summer first. And I already had a small list of publishers, maybe like one. And then seeing that Melissa had published with Bold Strokes, I'm like, okay, we'll add them to my list and do more research. But I was too afraid to submit to Bold Strokes because they were my #1 choice. I had read a couple other books. I really liked it. I submitted to a couple other publishers. And once I got, back into the submission game, it was like pulling off a Band-Aid. I'm like, okay, it's time to finally just submit to BSB. We'll see what happens. And I wasn't expecting anything from it. And so I was shocked when I got an email. I had 2 friends over, 2 childhood friends. They were in town, and we were getting ready to go out, and I got this email. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. So yeah, it's a long journey, but it's the happily ever after.
I love that. Nice romance tie in there, right? So that's great. 2 of you have now done that. I appreciate that very much. Well, let's hear from the author of Strawberry Summer again. Melissa, is there anything you would like to add to what you told us about your process?
Yeah, I kind of went through the crux of it already, so I won't go back over that. But there were elements that I didn't talk about, which was how green I was and how that didn't prevent me from being picked up. What happened was they contacted me after submitting the manuscript and said, hey, and this was waiting in the wings, we like what we see here, but there are some things before we move into publishing that we would like to see changed, and give me some notes, which I don't know how common that is. I think my situation might have been unique, where they knew that there was something to this novel, but it needed some work, and they gave me notes. Because I'm from a theatrical background, I'm very used to notes. I get notes a lot, and it's about implementing into the show and making changes. And I'm somebody who I think I'm a good collaborator in that sense. And so I took the notes and ran with them and said, okay, I've done it here. And they took a second look at it. And then a contract was issued at that point. But it wasn't just a blanket, hey, we're taking the book. And I do think that's an interesting part of the story, because I wonder now looking back, and this is something that, I should ask Radcliffe about, but I think they wanted to see, like, is this somebody who can take notes? Is this somebody who is capable of being edited? Or and I hope I showed that I could do that. But it was interesting not having shown this manuscript to anybody. I didn't tell anybody that I was writing a book. It was my little secret, nobody knew. And so I sent it off. And then when it came back with notes, it was like somebody in some other state just read my work. my something that I wrote, somebody in the state of New York read it and is now giving me notes. And this is super surreal, and cut to now where it's a more commonplace for me that people are reading what I write, but it blew my mind.
I love that. Yeah, that first time when you realize that you are being read is just amazing. Erin, how about you? Yeah, she read it and liked it. Erin, what about you? What was your process?
Well, I'd actually like to touch a little bit on something that Melissa said, because I think it is a testament to how much Bold Strokes can really help you shape your story, what's already a good core story, into an awesome book. And I mean, Waiting in the Wings is still my favorite Melissa Brayden book. So 19 books later. So, I mean, it really is a testament to how they will work with you and try to help you kind of enhance what's already there, So for my journey, in 2007, Bold Strokes was a lot smaller then, and, still doing really well, but smaller. And this was pre-Sandy. I had just gone through a breakup and had all these kind of like angsty emotional things to get out, and hadn't really been writing in a long time, and just decided, I've got all this extra time now, let's see what I can do. And like I said, I challenged myself to finish this manuscript and submit it. And so I did. I submitted to Bold Strokes and got an email from Rad saying, I'd like to talk to you about this. And before we have a phone call, why don't you send me like some other ideas that you're thinking about as well? So I did that. We got on the phone, and she was like, we like the way you tell a story, but this story isn't quite what we're looking for. But one of the other ideas that you talked about, we want you to write that book and we'll publish it. So, I mean, just based off me sending an email saying, hey, this is the idea I'm thinking about, and having seen that previous sample of what I was writing, we contracted that book. So.
Yep. That is a great story. And it goes to show that, yes, as I'm seeing in the chat, Georgia Beers is in the chat, and she has been saying how much BSB does in terms of education. And so that's not only true on the front end, right? Like you all are sharing, it's also true once you're in the family, so to speak. And we're about to have a question about the family. Our next question comes from Renee, who asks, what is one thing you discovered about BSB that was unexpected, which you learned once you were part of the BSB family? And I really do love that metaphor. It's a metaphor that I feel myself. I'm happy to hear about other people as well who feel that way. But Morgan, let's start with you. What is one thing you discovered about BSB that was unexpected that you learned once you were on board?
You're asking the new person first.
Yeah.
I came at an interesting time. My first book, it was 2019. And so I hadn't been involved in any of, the bookathons are all new, but I started basically meeting everyone during the pandemic. So I don't have a great grasp on the normal, how everyone interacts, but I really do like how we do have these bookathons. We have a lot of the Grow programs, so there is a lot more education that we pick up from just within the community. And the bookathons helped me connect with a couple other authors from BSB, which has been really great. So that would be my answer.
So you didn't know about those before you joined. You had no idea that there was all of this education that happens behind.
No, I didn't. And
Right.
I remember thinking, like, I hope that there is some education, because I always want to learn more. You know, we're never a perfect writer. So when I saw that these emails, these BSB grows, I got really excited. Just learning more from, you know, Rad and Sandy, but then also our peers as well.
Awesome. Excellent. Great. Erin, how about you? What's one thing you discovered about BSB?
Yeah, so I think it is the kind of family aspect of it, because, you know, writing is pretty solitary for me anyway. I mean, I don't have a lot of people beta reading as I go along, and it's very much something I do on my own for the most part. And so, and even thinking about submitting, it was, I'm going to have an interaction with a publisher, an editor. I didn't have a lot of knowledge about what was going to happen after that. But, and Nell, I mean, we were a month apart, I think, in our first books.
We
and
were.
So that first year, I believe we both went to GCLS without anything published. And so that was the surprise to me, was, oh, I'm going to be interacting with other authors and, you know, being able to connect with them about what we're doing. And so I think it really is just the whole, and we've continued to do that over all the years of going to conferences or, connecting now virtually. And that's been the biggest thing for me, is that it's not just me getting published, it's me getting this kind of network of people that are there to support you, you know, if you'll reach out. So that's what I like about it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, here. Thank you for that. And how about you?
Same thing as Erin's, the network. It's the team that you have behind you. It's also my first event happened to be, and it was probably the last time I traveled, Women's Week 2019.
Wow.
Was it 28? I can't remember. It was the Women's Week before the pandemic. I've lost sense of time. But when I got there, I was like nervous as all get out, because I'm like,
You had a cool hat on though.
oh, thank you.
I like that hat.
And it was, I didn't, you know, here's all these people that I've read some of their books. I know some, you know, seen their faces. And now I'm on not only on a panel with them, but now I'm also interacting with them. And my book hadn't come out yet, but I had people, I mean, there were people that knew who I was. And I'm like, they know me. How do they know my name? And, you know, oh, I read your book. And I'm like, how? So it's the whole networking aspect of it was, and to be made to feel like I'm already part of the family was such an awesome thing. And to be so involved in everything that's been going on since the pandemic, and being able to be a part of such major projects and events has been really, it's been mind-blowing for me. And the team, again, the team behind me, the editors, the art, you know, art department, all of that, and you get to express your opinion. They're not just telling you what to do. You have some say in it. So, which is awesome, and I love it.
Those are such helpful details. Thank you so much, Anne. That's great. So Melissa, how about you? What is one thing you discovered about BSB that was unexpected to you?
Oh, there's so many. How can I choose one? I'll do a drive-by of a couple things, and then I'll focus on one. One, you guys have touched on it already, but I didn't realize I'd have a built-in family, and I have some of my best friends in the entire world are I met through having the same publisher, and I had no idea that was going to happen. That was not something I was prepared for. But I'll move past that. The platform was much bigger than I thought it would be, coming from a smaller press. I thought I would put my book out there and then maybe write another one. And I didn't realize how many opportunities there would be for me to participate in things like this, or go to different events where there were panels set up for me. I literally just got on a plane and walked off, and I'm on a panel that I didn't have to arrange or set up, and there's people there. I think if I were self-publishing or with a less adept publishing house, I don't know that I would have books in French, books in Dutch, books in Spanish, all of them on Audible. I had a series contracted by a major studio and optioned, and the TV show didn't get made, but it got optioned, and that was a really cool thing. There's talks of a video game. I don't know where that process is, but none of this could have happened without the help of Bold Strokes, and I'm wildly aware of that. But the biggest thing of all, and I don't want to take too much time, is that when I started, I thought this would be, you know, a nice little thing to do on the side. I really never imagined that writing could be my full-time job. And then slowly, as more books were coming out, I was realizing, you know, I'm selling pretty good, I think. And this seems to be going well. I wonder if one day this isn't just going to be like a little vacation money hobby thing. And here I am these years later with, yes, I had to have some titles under my belt to make it happen. And yes, I sell in the romance genre, which happens to sell better than other genres just on its own. But yeah, I'm able to do it full time, and I make a decent living, and I'm comfortable and happy. And it's not something I ever would have imagined before. So that was a mind-blowing thing to kind of stumble upon in this process.
That's wonderful. And of course, we're all glad that you do write full time. Can you tell us more about the video game? We're getting some questions in the chat about the video game.
I don't know. It's early, and I can't say too much because I think there's still things in the works, but it sounds cool.
Stay tuned for news about the video game.
Stay tuned.
Audience.
Yeah, it's just an up in the air thing. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Nance, how about you?
Well, I'm kind of with Morgan in that I published during the pandemic, so I haven't had an opportunity to have an in-person event with all of you, but I have certainly felt the love and the support, and that goes everybody with BSB on the administrative side, you know, Sandy and Cindy, and you know, and the like Ann mentioned, the collaboration. So that's phenomenal. But even with the authors, you know, we had release day, or you have an event, and there's so much support amongst the authors. And I think that's phenomenal. And we all are right there for each other, supporting each other, throwing ideas out there. You know, it just, that's the family aspect has been incredible.
Wonderful. I'm so glad that metaphor works for everyone here. It's yes. Clear that we found friendships, that we've grown as writers. All of that is just amazing. Thank you so much for the great stories. So we have another question from our wonderful audience. And I'm really glad someone asked this question, because I was going to if they didn't. So what's the best advice you would pass along to a first-time author who is seeking to publish with BSB? So we're going to give it to Melissa first. What is the best advice you'd pass along?
Definitely, and Morgan alluded to this earlier, read what you're writing, and read in your genre to see what works. Look and see, and this is a marketing thing. If you're in it for the storytelling and the art, and that's one thing. But if you're in it for maybe looking at this being a career, the marketing aspect is important. And look and see what sells, and just kind of see where you fit. So that first of all, you have realistic expectations, and second of all, you know what works. And I think that's a good education, and also reading the authors that Bold Strokes publishes, so you kind of see what their lane is.
Great. Thank you for that. Erin, how about you? What advice would you give?
I think, check out the websites of the publishers that you're looking at, that you narrow it down to a small list and check out their websites. And Melissa kind of touched on this earlier, as far as them wanting to see that she could take notes. Realize going in that there are going to be notes, there are going to be changes. The level of that varies from author to author, I'm sure. I only know my own experience in that, but at least with Bold Strokes, I can tell you that Rad and Sandy and the entire staff, their intention is to put out the very best stories that they can to our communities. And so if you're getting notes, it's constructive. There's a reason for it, and there's a lot of experience to back up what sells and what stories work. And then you kind of got to figure out when you can dig in your heels a little bit and say, no, this is how I want the story to go. But realize that most of the changes and edits are for the benefit of your story.
Yep. That's a really great piece of advice, right? To be open to editing and to remember that the purpose of editing is to make that book stronger. But it is hard. It's okay, right? To have a reaction that's at first like, oh, why do I have to do this? But if you can move past that, that's what matters. So thank you for that, Erin. Really appreciate that. Anne, how about you? What piece of advice would you give?
I'm going to piggyback off Melissa and Erin. One, I think if you haven't read a Bold Stroke Books author, I think try and pick up a few in different genres to see where you fit in, and to see what types of writers that Bold Stroke Books likes to put out. I also think that you have to put your ego on the back burner with those notes. Being self-published, I didn't have that knowledge of editing correctly. So I had a lot of what they call head popping point of views. My point of view was just shoddy, period, my writing. So it took a lot of learning. I'm still, making some little errors here and there, and I'm, 2-3 books in. But I've had to put my ego on the back burner, look at it as a learning experience, something that you can carry on into your next novel. I've learned a lot. My writing has grown so much because of the team behind us. So I think it is important to look at those notes as constructive criticism and not to change your story, not to change how you write, but just to better what the material that you're putting out.
Mm-hmm. Great, well said. And another pitch for trusting in your editor and for trying to enjoy that process, to grow as a writer. Excellent. Nance, how about you? What piece of advice would you pass along?
I do love the editing process. I will say that I have found so much value in editing and the notes, the feedback, and I was a head hopper too, so I totally get it. But just learning the craft. There's so much to learn in the craft. And what I would advise people to do is take a leap of faith. Submit your work, because it's no if you never submit your work. That's the biggest advice I can give anybody.
Yep. Here. Submit your work. And I think let me pause for a second before turning to Morgan. How many of us in this space were afraid to do it?
Oh, totally.
I mean, everybody, right? So those of you, I'm seeing in the chat people who are identifying as closeted writers, and some of us who are chiming in and saying, I was a closeted writer.
Come out of the closet.
Come out. Exactly. It's time. Because fear is the enemy of art, right? Fear is the enemy of creativity. And that is how, keep pushing through that fear. That's how you do it. And everybody here is afraid. So you can do it too. Morgan, what piece of advice do you have for first-time folks wanting to publish with BSB?
I'm going to repeat a lot of, what everyone said, but just going back to the fear, there's this movie I saw, I think it was called The Greatest Dad. It's like this weird indie film and had Robin Williams in it. And he was an author and he spent all this time writing these stories that were never published. And he was like really depressed about it. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, if I get too scared of these rejections that I'm getting, I'm going to be spending all this time as a closeted writer in my bedroom, not socializing with anyone because I wanted to write. And then I'm going to let the fear of not publishing just like waste all that time. And I did not want that to happen. So yeah, it's scary submitting your stuff. It's scary getting a rejection. But I think we've all here have been rejected. You have to be rejected in order to be successful. So failure is part of success. So I would just say, submit it, make sure that manuscript is as polished as you can be. You need to read it like 50 million times to the point where like you can't read any more of your writing, but you got to make sure that it's the best it can be, and submit, push through the scared feelings and what everyone else said, read some of the books from publishers, just to know if your work fits in with them. Yeah.
Great. That's such great advice. Please do.
If you do get a rejection letter, my suggestion is, and if they don't note why it was rejected, ask. What could it hurt to say? Could you tell me what was it about this that didn't work for you? Or, you're not asking for a whole editing process. Just if you can give me just a brief little bit of why it was not, I can't talk, why it was rejected.
Yep. Great advice. You can always ask. Go ahead, Morgan.
One more thing. I think it's also worth knowing that a rejection is subjective. So if you get rejected, that doesn't mean that you're awful. It just didn't work out. So not take that too personally or that you're not a good writer. I've like Anne said, she got rejected, like 70 something. I got that number, and those number of rejections is not a reflection of your work. Like you can still publish that book you want to publish.
Great advice.
Well said. Anybody else want to chime in with more advice you thought of? Feel free, Melissa, go for it.
Just because we're here talking about a specific publisher, one of the questions I get asked a lot, and I think this is a great place to maybe debunk it a little bit, is there are some tabloid rumors out there about hoops you have to jump through, or how many times I've been asked, well, I heard that Bold Strokes has a quota on sex scenes, or you have to have 2 in it in order. And I've gotten that question a lot. I thought, well, that is really interesting, but I want to dispel that myth now and say, no, there's nothing like that. There's no requirements about your writing or your story. If I turned in a fade to black and it fit the story, that would be great. Everybody would be happy. So if you're out there thinking, or if you've heard some of these tabloid rumors, that they're not true at all. There's no quota.
I love that. That's such an interesting rumor.
You haven't heard it? No,
I have not, I must say, but I do tend to write the sex scenes, so maybe that's why. So who else? Anybody else have some more advice? This is such great advice. All right, let's go back to a question about editing. Some of you have already shared some editing stories, but I would love to hear more. And these can be an editing story where you learn something, as a few of you have shared, an editing story that was kind of silly, that made you feel a little bit goofy. Anybody want to share an editing story? Let's start with Erin.
Yeah, so this was more kind of in my self-editing. I had written a book, and one of the secondary characters' names was Shirley. And I'd finished the book, and I handed it off to my wife to read before I sent it in, and she got about halfway through it. And what you need to know about my wife is she's a good story proofreader, but if I'm looking for the fine details, she doesn't read all the words. She admits that she doesn't read all the words. So she's not going to get my typos, but the story she's good with. So I handed it over to her, and about halfway through, she said, who is Sheila? And I said, what? And she goes, well, I don't know who this Sheila is. She just showed up in the middle of the book. And so I went and looked at where she was talking about. I had changed Shirley's name halfway through the book to Sheila somehow, and finished the book with her being Sheila, and have no idea how that happened. So that's one of those things that we were able to catch, and I didn't have to embarrass myself with Shelley, although I just told everyone. So, but I mean, as far as the editing process, I've been with Shelley Thrasher for most of my books. I've been lucky enough to be edited by Rad and by Sandy for novella and short story projects. And I've learned so much from all of them about all the, point of view, and and Shelley has really tightened up some of my passive writing and really made me think about using active verbs and things like that. So, I mean, there's just so much to learn from editors.
Excellent. I love that story. Yep. Poor Sheila versus Shelley versus Shirley. Yeah. Go ahead, Anne. What about you? It's a lot of SH words. Any editing stories that you want to share?
Well, the editing process has been awesome. I have Cindy Cressup as my editor, and I absolutely adore her. Don't tell her I said that. The one story I have is the work in progress. Well, not a work in progress. A story that is about to go to print and come out in the fall. It starts in 1985, and Cindy was very excited about that because that was the year she graduated high school and the character graduated high school. So in between the editing notes, I had, oh my God, I remember this and this. And so having that excitement from my editor was pretty cool. And knowing, because it was around the time I graduated as well, and being able to share that was a cool process. I mean, it's not an exciting story, but I thought it was pretty cool with her extra little notes in there about, certain things that happened where she remembered, and she equated, her life with some of what the character was going through. So it kind of gave me a nice boost to say, well, hopefully the reader is going to be able to do the same thing when they read the story.
That's great. Love that enthusiasm. That makes you feel so good.
Yeah.
Melissa, how about you? Any editing stories you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. I was thinking about it. I've worked with 4 different editors who I've loved for different reasons. but I think Bold Strokes is really good about playing matchmaker and teaming you up with who they know you need in that moment. And I was really green when I first started. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of writing experience. And so they knew that, you know, I like Anne, worked with Cindy in the beginning, and she's really good at teaching you some basics if you're missing some of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful to her for that. But if I think about a story, I'm going to go with Linda Sandoval, who I did about 10 or 11 books with as my editor. And this is not such a funny story as it is a devastating story. But so I submitted first position. I don't use beta readers, just as a side note, but I sent it off to Linda and she read it, and it was a pretty medium-sized edit. There were some changes she was asking for. If you know the story, you know that the character of Anna never really heads off to Miami, but in the original draft, I sent her away. I sent her away to Miami, and Linda said, okay, at this point in the book, this is where some trouble comes in. Maybe we shouldn't send her to Miami. And she gave me some ideas about how to finesse, and was going to leave it up to me to kind of fix the issue she had come up with. So it was going to be some decent heavy lifting here. And so I did a lot of rewriting and never sent her off to Miami, and it went a whole different direction. And I crafted, you know, and that's what the book became. Sent it back to Linda and waited to hear, and she came back and said, well, okay, so some of the changes I noticed you didn't want to go with, but we'll work with what you've done. I'm still concerned about this or that. And she said something about Anna going to Miami, and I went, well, she doesn't go to Miami anymore. She says, yes she does. And so she'd done a whole edit on the same exact version that I sent her the first time. Again.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I felt like I'd murdered someone. I felt so horrible about it. Like she'd done all this work and thinking she didn't take any of my notes. I gave her all these notes, and I'd done hours of work of fixing the book. And so she was so great about it, you guys. She was like, okay, we're going to get through this together. It's going to be fine, Melissa. It's going to be fine. But I was mortified because she went out of her way to do a lot of work she didn't have to do. But we were bonded after that, and I never did that to her again. But definitely name your file something different so that you put some dates on your file. I never did that again. But yeah, that was awful of me.
Thank you for letting us in with that story, Melissa. I appreciate that. It's a good piece of tangible advice for our audience. Wonderful.
File names matter.
File names really do matter. That is true. Nance, how about you? Do you have an editing story you want to share with us?
I have Victoria, and she has been phenomenal. Like everybody, I just adore my editor. And probably mostly because she encourages us, you know, they all do. They encourage us to be our best selves. They don't rewrite our stories, but they give us notes that help us create a better version of our stories. And I think that was something I never expected out of a publisher. And it's been the most pleasant surprise ever, was to have the editor's notes and the changes still be my words. You know, that everything that I create is still, when the book is done, it's all of them are still my words. I just had encouragement and ideas from my editor. And that is such a refreshing thing that I never knew existed. I thought for sure they're going to come back and be like, redline everything. And, you know, certainly I had a fair amount of red lines, but that was, I think that's been the most pleasant surprise out of the whole journey, has been that in the end, I was encouraged to just recreate my words. So
that's really wonderful, because one other theme I'm hearing is that BSB is signing people, right? People who will write excellent stories.
Yes.
And so, for example, Erin's earlier story about how maybe not this story, but we like how you write. We want you, and we want a different story written by you. That's really important. And that speaks to what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
They want to invest in you and help you grow. And that's very special. Yeah.
I think that is over the top true for everybody that I've dealt with at BSB, and not just the editors, but Radcliffe, Sandy, everybody, the marketing team, everybody wants each one of us to be successful.
Yeah.
You know,
it's really powerful. Thank you for that. Morgan, how about you? Do you have an editing story? I know you're busy talking in chat about your mom and how she feels about your sex needs, but
about the sex needs. Yeah, we're all watching this on the side going, holy crap.
Wow.
I just went on vacation with my mom, and she brought it up again. I'm like, Mom, you need to drop this. Like, it's really not it's not a big deal. And she just thinks it was the most graphic thing she's ever read. Like, you need a simmer. So I have a lot of opinions about it. So sorry, I had to vent.
No, don't be sorry. Kat is
I feel
enjoying
it.
it.
My mom reads all of mine, and I've asked her not to, but she won't stop. She
Yeah, my
says she
mom
won't
won't
get the
either.
full book. She says she won't get the full book experience. It's just, she's read every book I've written and every sex scene I've written.
Yeah, it's pretty embarrassing. I censored the stuff for my parents. My dad was trying to read a book on the beach one time, like, you're approaching a sex scene. Can you like just skip 20 pages? Because I'm right next to you. This is really awkward. I don't know how I feel about this. But an editing story. I think just the whole editing process is just like very humbling, and just you grow with it. Just remembering it was one of my majors in college, and I would dread the workshop days because I would just get like so defensive over my stuff. And now I want my editor to just like rip out that manuscript, like take all the bad out of it, because the more red lines I see, I'm like, okay, well, now we're getting rid of all the bad stuff. So I do like that when it's ripped up in a nice way. And my editor's Barbara Ann Wright, and she always does it in a nice way with some humor, which I'm all about. And another thing I learned was called Crutch Words. And apparently I have a lot of them, and my Crutch Words are well and just. And Barbara messaged me. She's like, you have over 200 justs in your manuscript. You need to cut them out. I think it was actually over 300. And I just submitted a new manuscript to her, and I checked it because I didn't want to get in trouble again. And I had over 200. I'm like, oh, I guess I say just a lot when I talk in person. So now every time I see just, I always say her like, do you really need that? Sometimes I just put it in anyways and worry about it later. But yeah, the crutch words, the words that we always use when you don't necessarily need to use them. And I would have never noticed that if it weren't for my editor. I wouldn't have, when the friends who read it, like, they're not going to say, you use too many justs, and well, I think you need to delete those. So that just makes me pay more attention to the words I put on the manuscript. Every word matters.
Yeah, love it. And we all have those words. And did you want to share your crutch words? I know you were reacting to that. No, you don't want to share? No need
Mine
to
were
share
ellipses.
them.
Ellipses.
Oh, you used a lot of ellipses.
Oh
Okay.
my God, I overused ellipses. Yeah.
Well, those are some great editing stories.
Can I add one thing to that now?
Yes, please do.
So talking about mothers, when I gave my mom my first book, we made a deal that she could read whatever she wanted to, but we would never discuss any of the sex scenes. So I've had that deal in place since book one. But I wanted to touch on editing again for just a second, because we're all kind of, it can be an intimidating process, but it's not always just negative. I get feedback from Shelley about things that she likes and, things like that. And I remember one time I was actually editing, or I was writing a short story for one of the Bold Strokes compilations, and Rad was editing it, and which, I'm already intimidated anyway, right? Rad is editing my short story. It was just, I was scared. But, and so I got the edits back from her, and, there were some changes, and I saw, you can read it, and I saw the point in all the changes. And then I got to this one scene, and this was actually, I believe this was for one of the erotica collections. So even more nervous. And I got to one of the comments, and it was, this is a really nice image, right? And I think I could live for the rest of the year on Rad telling me that something I wrote is a really nice image. So you do get some of that positive feedback, and that's kind of what gets you through the hard parts of the editing, I think.
That's a great point. Yeah, the power of positive feedback while you're also being helped to grow, and that's a theme we've heard today. So we're coming up on about 1 minute left. I want to just answer some quick questions, make sure that we can answer some quick questions, and then I am going to ask you each for the title of your next forthcoming book. So that's going to be my last question for you. First of all, we have a question from somebody about contracts, from two people actually. We're not going to get into the details about contracts. That's not something we're going to do today, but did anybody have someone look over their contract before they signed it? Anybody have help with that?
No, I read mine. I read it,
Yeah,
but I never had anyone review it because it was very straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
That's the
understood
best
it.
thing about the contracts. They are very straightforward. They're easy for a layperson to read and understand. So if you don't feel like you need an attorney to look it over, you can understand it really well.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for that feedback. And we had someone ask if BSB is welcoming of trans authors and narratives. And the answer is yes, 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 absolutely. Please write those stories. We need them. We need them. We need them. Last but certainly not least, Anne, tell us the name of your next book.
My next book is Love and Lotus Blossoms, coming out in the fall. It's a coming of age story and a late in life love story.
I can't wait. Morgan, how about you? Next book.
My next one is Infinite Summer. It's a young adult romance. It's going to be like my first fluff story, and it comes out in December.
Fantastic. Thank you. Nance, how about you?
An Alaskan Wedding. It comes out in November 2021.
All right. Can't wait. Erin?
I have a novella in a collection that comes out in February with Julie Cannon and Ann Shade, actually, and it's called Secret Valentine.
That's going to be such a fun collection. Melissa Brayden, next novel.
Marry Me, and it's out in November.
I love that. What a great title. All right. Our audience, thank you so much for your wonderful questions. I'm sorry for the ones we couldn't get to today. Please find everybody on Facebook and ask them, or Twitter. We would love to answer those questions. Panelists, thank you so much. And Bold Strokes Books, thank you for being a wonderful family. Take care, everyone. Stay safe, and please join us again at 6:30.